Thank you very much for staying with us on The Key Points. I'm Jifa Bampo. So we move on to our final topic, which is about safety for communities that are surrounded by mining operations. As many of us have been following the incident that happened at Apiatsé on the 20th of January, and since then, a lot has happened. Recently, the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, the Honorable Abu Jinapor, fined Maxam Limited, the explosives company that was transporting the explosives through that area, some $5 million. Now, the fine is in two parts. They have to pay $1 million first, pending other requirements that are met for the restoration of their licenses, and then another $5 million, which will be paid in installments over 18 months. After that, the president has also directed that the monies be put in the Apiatsé Reconstruction Development Fund to assist in the redevelopment of the Apiatsé community. But the point also is, what can we do to make mining communities safer, or communities that are surrounded by mining operations? Because there are various aspects of the operations. It's not just even just the transportation. There are blast things that happen. How can we prevent maybe their buildings from even getting cracked, the environment or the foundations? There are also potential spillages of harmful substances. How can we prevent that from polluting water bodies or harming the soil, such that people can continue to farm, which is usually their livelihood in these communities? I'm joined in studio this morning by Mr. Theophilus Jimaga. He is a mining engineer and lawyer. He's to my left. Good morning, Mr. Jimaga. Thank you for coming. And we are also joined by Seth Wolasima. He's a mining consultant to my far left as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Wolasima, for coming in. So first, let me start with you, Mr. Wolasima. What are your thoughts about how this whole Maxam explosion or the Apiatsé explosion has been handled up until now?
Thank you so much, Jifa, and good morning to your cherished viewers. The whole episode is quite bizarre, to say the least, because why should that incident happen in the first place? It's because regulations that have been put in place have not been followed. And, you know, such breaches are bound to cause such incidents. And this is where we are at. But I believe that so far, the way it has been handled and the outcomes, you know, from the maybe white paper, should I call it white paper, that the minister has issued with directives and fines and further regulations to make sure that such a thing never happens again. I think that all in all, for me, where I sit, I think that there's a lot to be desired about the outcomes.
So Maxam was fined by the minister earlier this week. That notification came through, $6 million. Why do you seem not to agree with that decision? It seemed to have been welcomed by many.
No, the question is this: how did they come about that figure? Because as we all saw, that explosion destroyed part of a major road. It literally razed down a whole village. And it has killed people. A lot of people are injured. So what went into that figure of 6 million? That's what I would want to know. Because to rebuild that place, I heard electrical infrastructure was also affected. Transformers and power lines were brought down, and all things like that. So, what went into that figure? That is the first question. And looking at the damage, I don't think that figure, for me, is adequate.
You think it should have been more?
It should have been more, absolutely. And I think that the premise on which they arrived at those numbers was that the law, the regulation says that if you are in breach of any of the clauses of the regulation, you are supposed to be fined a certain X amount.
Yes, it's from 600 cedis
600
to
cedi.
10,000 US dollars. But the minister in his statement indicated that upon weighing the magnitude of what had happened, imposed the additional fine that we saw.
I think that law should be, that part of the regulation should be reviewed, because in this day and age, 21st century, you're charging such meager, what do we call it, penalties for breach. I think we should go look at that aspect of the regulation again.
So I think that was a view that the minister has not fully expatiated on how he came to that figure. But there is also a view that they would have had discussions with Maxam, certainly, about what was going to happen. Maybe this is a company that cannot afford more than that.
This is laughable, because what they have been fined is a slap on the wrist. Wow. That's what I believe. Maxam is not a small company. I don't know, what, and why should they even worry about the, what do you call it, the balance sheet of the company? They have caused a problem, and that problem needs a solution, and it must be resolved. So where does that come in, where they said, they've looked at the company and the company is not performing? Is that their business?
So I think that was a comment that Maxam itself in its statement had referred to, in terms of keeping their business going, in terms of ensuring that they are in the space where they can continue to support the country and all others mining in that space.
You see, it's unfortunate that, we always allow ourselves to be shortchanged. I don't know whether it is a way of trying to say that, you have to take it or leave it. I don't believe that. The Maxam comes from Australia.
I thought they were a Spanish company.
It is Spanish?
Spanish company, Spanish. Yeah.
Okay. If it were other countries, I'm sure that that fine will triple or quadruple, because of the enormity of the situation.
All right.
It doesn't matter about their balance sheet or whatever.
Right. Yes, Mr. Jimaga, your thoughts?
Let me take this opportunity to correct a few things. The statement said that the fine is actually $1 million. Mm-hmm. Okay. The $5 million is, as it were, donation from Maxam.
Okay.
The part that it becomes difficult to understand is that it's a donation with conditions up to payment terms. So it becomes blurry whether it's a real donation or it's a by force donation, the $5 million. Number two, the minister's statement made mention of fines from 600 Ghana to $10,000. With respect to the statement of the minister, that is not true position of the law. The 600 is as a result of criminal action being instituted against somebody who flouts the regulation. That is 12 penalty points, which is a 50 penalty points minimum. A penalty point is 12 cedis, which is 600, or 100 penalty points, which is 1,200, or prison term of 3 months minimum or 6 months maximum. So those are the criminal things. Those are not within the decision of the minister.
So are you saying that if there is an incident, we don't have anything in our law that determines
I am coming
the
to
fine?
That. No, the other thing is that it says about if there is a breach for which no penalty has been prescribed, this is what we will do. That is the LI 2177. If you go to LI 2182, it talks about the fact that if there is a breach of any of the regulations, there is in it where, for example, you don't submit explosive transportation plan, the breach is $10,000 for the first instance. Any subsequent day for which you don't submit it is $2,000. Now, Mazam is saying that the breaches did not cause the explosion. Now, so does it mean that the breaches were there for a long time? If it were, do we calculate the days and find them? If that is not the situation, what is the basis for the minister's $1 million fine? We heard that they use administrative powers. Yes, under the Constitution, Article 23, they are allowed to use administrative powers, but it has to be fair and candid. And under 296, Article 296, it shouldn't be arbitrary or capricious. There's no basis here. It's just an arbitrary fine. However, there were years back when other companies also flouted or were involved in accidents for which the ministers fined them, 2.4 million to another company, etc. All these things had no basis, but we have accepted them.
Okay, just so that we slow it down a bit, you've said that there have been previous precedents where the ministers in the Lands Ministry and Natural Resources Ministry had used administrative process to fine companies that had been in breach over one incident or the other.
Exactly so.
Okay. If companies feel strongly that they are not in breach, can't they challenge whatever they are fined?
Yes, they can challenge. I listened to the Deputy Minister of Lands and Natural Resources the other day and said if they are not okay, they can go to court. You see, the long-term situation is that these fines were tied to the renewal or the giving back of the license of Maxam for them to continue with their production, transportation, etc., and to serve the mining industry. In the long term, who benefits or who loses? That's what we are looking at. Nobody is interested in the collapse of Maxam. Now, of course, maybe their competitors might be interested in their collapse. We don't know, but natural instinct to show that. But then there will be impact of that on the company's revenue, the country's revenue, etc. So if Maxam were to have played the hardball, they would have said, no, hold on, we aren't going to pay this. This is not what the law says. But we are going to go to court and seek judicial review of your decision. But believe you me, we are in an environment where such a long-drawn battle can affect the future of Maxam. And remember, their license will be up for renewal maybe in the next 3 months, 4 months, or at the end of the year. And this will all come to bite them. So in order to, I think, avoid all these battles with the ministry or the regulator, that's why they decide to go. But it is wrong. We shouldn't have gone that way. We should have said, let's do the right thing. If I were advising Maxam, I would have said, look, or the minister, that said, go by what is the law. Have discussion with Maxam to say, we are going by what is in the law. But the long term is that your image, the brand, your effect on the community, etc., is down.
But going by what you say is the law, if even Mr. Wolasima says that what we say is the fine imposed is grossly inadequate, then by going by law, there isn't something specific. It means you can barely fine as much.
Yes, that you are totally right.
But people will not be happy with that.
Yes, that is what we have now. Then you see, the minister's statement said this is without prejudice to any criminal or civil action. So there could be civil actions. The community members should start their class action. The government itself could drag Maxam to court for what has happened to the infrastructure within those areas. Then the fines will come properly from the court, and we are happy. But as I said, even the 6 million or the 1 million, whichever way you look at it, it's a slap on the wrist, as my colleague has said. But it is even without basis.
Okay, so can I ask, since you're a mining engineer and civil engineer also and lawyer, are you able to give us a view of maybe similar explosive incidents in maybe other jurisdictions and what probably the fine looks like?
Generally, we might be jumping, but let me go there. You see, the airlines we have in Ghana are quite rigorous, and they were done as a result of experience and assistance from South Africa, Australia, and Canada, where such things had happened way back 50s of years ago, and these were the steps they've taken. That is why our LI has been so rigorous. So the framers of the LI never envisaged we were going to have a scenario like this. That is why they didn't anticipate that when this will happen and this will be the fine. So in the mind of the framers, our laws were so tight, so rigorous that such an accident or incident wouldn't have happened. So we don't have examples of yesteryears, like 10 years, 20 years, just immediately to give. The previous ones we had were all very old, and there were times where technology has not developed to this level, and sort of transportation, etc., were not as we have now. So it will be inappropriate to compare those examples with today. But going forward, we have an opportunity now. Things have changed since we have put in place our laws. Communities have developed. Personnel have evolved in technology, etc. So it is now time for us to look at the gap within the law and correct it. That is my view in this area.
All right. Now, Mr. Olasime, or is there anything you want to just add before I ask any other questions? Yes.
No, me?
Yes, sir.
No.
Okay. So now, in terms of the reconstruction or the assistance of the community and all that, there's a fund that has been set up. We know that a lot of the community members are still perching in, places given them by the church and other blocks and all that. How do you think we should approach the reconstruction or rehabilitation? Because there's a question about whether it's even safe to reconstruct the area for the community members after such a community or an area has undergone such major trauma.
Yeah, precisely. I think that first of all, they need to assess the area, geotechnically, because there might be some shifts here and there in the land, underneath. So they need to really do soil tests and do all kinds of geotechnical studies to find out exactly, the extent of the damage as it has to do with the ground itself before they attempt even to start construction, so that we don't have a situation where after construction there is some shift that will bring down all the buildings again. So a study needs to be made, and then we can go ahead with the construction.
Do you think that reconstructing or constructing is the way to go? Because the people will probably never have life as they experienced it.
Well, there are such disasters, that have happened, across the globe, and it's always an effort to reconstruct. And I think that this situation is not different. So definitely they have to reconstruct, because where else would they go except they have to be relocated to a certain area. And people, after they have lived in a place for so long, have some kind of emotional attachment to those areas, and pulling them out of those places, might not be the best. So I think that we should do everything possible to make sure that a place is reconstructed and the people resettled, in a very, comfortable way.
All right. And I'm told that we have the Honorable Minister for Lands and Natural Resources online, so let's take him. Good morning to you, Honorable Abu Jinapor.
Yes, good morning, madam.
Great, thank you very much.
Good morning to the viewers.
Thank you, sir, for joining us. Much appreciated. So we've not been able to get a bit more clarity on the decisions announced this week following the fines imposed on Maxam. So I just want to ask first, how much is the fine imposed on Maxam? Is it $1 million or $6 million?
Okay, so thank you very much. And once again, good morning to your cherished viewers. So straightforward answer to your question is that the fine component is $1 million, and the agreed sum to be paid additional sum to be paid as an agreed amount is $5 million, totaling $6 million.
When you say an agreed sum, is it meant to be restitution? Is it compensation? Or is it just to show goodwill to the government?
Well, you know, the Minister for Lands has by law oversight of the mining sector and is clothed with authority to impose fines and to exact certain payments, you know, when he deems it fit. In this case, as you know, fines have implications, all manner of implications. When you classify an amount as a fine, it has all manner of implications. For example, if all of the $6 million had been designated as a fine, by law, the president couldn't have directed that part of the money be used for the reconstruction of the community. Because once it's a fine, it goes into the accounts of the regulator and forms part of his internally generated funds. But there are other implications too. And so my view and judgment was that $1 million fine was reasonable, was fair, and was justifiable. But given the totality of the circumstances, the company ought to pay an additional amount of $5 million US, which they agreed to, which amount the president is asked be paid into the APHE support fund for the reconstruction of the community and also to support the victims of these unfortunate incidents.
In terms of the imposition of the fine by the lands minister, would you say that that's an administrative process that you activated?
Well, there's an administrative process backed by law. As I say, Section 100 of the Minerals and Mining Law 206 Act 703 makes the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources the general overseer of the mining sector. So that is the mandate, the basis on which the minister has a mandate to impose such fines when it deems fit. Yes, so it's an administrative fine backed by law.
The reason the reason why I asked the Honorable Jinapor is there's a view that when there are breaches under the law, it can attract fines, and from the statement from the Lands Ministry of anything from 600 cedis to 10,000 United States dollars. So the question is there a need to review what the law says about breaches and fines, such that the minister does not necessarily have to use these administrative processes and then based on a certain judgment or review of the extent of a situation to impose a fine?
Well, first of all, LI 2177 is an LI which is implemented by the Minerals Commission as a regulator. And so the amounts we quoted in the statement, which is between 600 Ghana cedis to $10,000 for the stated breaches, are matters which are within the four corners of the Minerals Commission. And in this particular case, as I've been trying to explain, given the totality and the gravity of the matter, I took the view that this is not a matter which should be dealt with within the confines of LI 2177, and for that matter, within the confines of the Minerals Commission, and therefore, the amounts which should be applicable will not be the 600 Ghana cedis to 10,000 US dollars. And that, pursuant to Section 100 of Act 703, the minister should elevate the matter or escalate the matter to this level and be able to deal with it in a manner that I've dealt with it. I don't know how the Ghanaian people would have reacted if it came to attention that such a tragic incident and the people who did not follow the protocols have been fined 600 Ghana cedis or 10,000 US dollars. And so in these matters, and there are examples, there are international examples in the United States, in Australia, in Canada, even in South Africa, where given the gravity and enormity of an accident or an incident, the political leadership, in other words, the minister with oversight can escalate the matter to his level, and that's exactly what I did in this particular case.
Now, there's a view that we need to have that specifically in law, because some may deem that the amount you fine the company, elevating the issue administratively, is not enough, because the company itself, when you look at what it made, maybe last year, for instance, going in more than $1 billion, they could then have been fined more.
Well, I take the point of those people, but where I sit, you need to do a lot of balancing act. You fine to you fine or you sanction to serve as a deterrent, to correct, to rehabilitate. You don't fine to destroy. So you don't fine to destroy entities. I mean, that is not a good way of exercising a discretion or exercising a power. And so we took all of these into account and looked at the financial statement and the cash flow of the company. So a lot of work went into it, a lot of thought went into it. And the jury will always be out there, and people will always have views which are welcomed and which we respect. And it's for that reason that we have set up a ministerial committee of inquiry chaired by Professor Richard Amankwa, who himself is a mining engineer of international repute and Vice Chancellor of the George Grant University of Mines and Technology, and also a representative from the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences, the Ghana Bar Association, a former Chief Inspector of Mines, and a distinguished former Chief Executive Officer of the Minerals Commission, who are to look at all of these matters. The totality of the safety regime of the mining sector is to be reviewed thoroughly, and they will make recommendations. I'm very certain that the matters to do with fines and how much and who should impose it and all of those will be subject matters which will occupy their attention in great detail. I have no doubt about that.
All right. Now, one of the other concerns now is about the safety of communities that may be impacted by mining operations. I know you've mentioned just now this committee that will take a total view, but is it time to do an audit of communities within mining operations and how they're affected? Maybe the foundations shake, maybe their buildings crack when explosions are done in a bid to get to the precious minerals. Maybe their water bodies are affected, or maybe there's significant spillage of harmful substances.
Yeah, Jibril, that's a very brilliant question. And I believe that those are matters which will definitely preoccupy the attention of this committee. And it's my expectation that such a recommendation will be made so that we can take that up to do this audit you are talking about. The complexities and the nuances of mine health and safety in the extractive industry generally across the world, and the mining sector in particular and in our country, is one that requires a lot more examination and interrogation, and it's exactly what I've asked this committee to do. And my view is that hopefully the committee will be able to present a report which will deal with all these various aspects of health and safety in mining, including what you just talked about. I mean, for example, I keep asking myself, there are people who live very close to mining operations, and as you know, mining operations are conducted with a lot of chemicals, cyanide, mercury, and all of those. What is, for instance, the impact of their operations on the long-term health conditions of the people who live in these communities? And do we even take our time to conduct research determine, for instance, that in 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time, what happens to these community members? And so these are all very important matters on the table. And I want to assure your viewers that that is exactly what we are trying to do. And that is why this committee has been set up. And hopefully the committee will come up. I have a lot of confidence in the committee, given the expertise we've assembled. The committee should be able to come up with a report and recommendations which will help us as a country address these matters once and for all.
All right. Many thanks to you, Honorable Abu Jinapor, Lands and Natural Resources Minister. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back with our guests in studio. Thank you very much for staying with us. So let's come back to our guests in studio. So let me start with Mr. Wolasime. So you heard the Lands Minister. In a sense, I got from him that, well, I stand by my decision, I made it. And this decision is looking at the company, its sheets, and not to collapse the company, but to ensure that, of course, the company makes some restitution while being able to go about its business.
Jifa, I still maintain that, you know, that figure that they came up with, I don't see it. It's not clear.
Why do you say you don't see it?
Because we should look at the damage that has been caused. We should try and value what damage, you know, 13 people died.
Yes.
100 people are
Injured.
And
then almost 400 displaced.
You see, and the whole village is destroyed. Electrical infrastructure is gone. Our road is gone. How did they come about that number? There must be a basis for that. It shouldn't be arbitrary.
But he indicated that they looked at the balance sheet of the company and their inflows and all that.
Well, again, I beg to differ on that because Maxam is a global group. And you don't see, you know, what is happening in Ghana alone. You know, because companies that operate globally, you know, always have, you know, support from, you know, sister companies in other jurisdictions. So,
you think they should have looked at their balance sheet as a
group.
Global, as a group entity,
yes.
not the
not
local rep.
Ghana Limited, Maxam Ghana Limited. You should look at Maxam Global. Because, you know, if you say because the Ghana group is not doing well, or the Ghana Limited is not doing well, so if they cause damage worth hundreds of millions
maybe
of dollars.
maybe they are doing well, but this is when it's talk about doing well, this is the quantum of doing well. It may not be at the level of their rep in another country.
Well,
that's what we have.
Well, I think that I still find it difficult to wrap my head around.
For you, it should have been, the decision should have been more based on what their global sheet looks like,
yes.
And then the fine imposed should have been more.
Absolutely.
And then whatever additional payments they make also more.
Absolutely.
All right.
I agree. I agree with that.
Yes, Mr. Jimaga. The minister talked about a committee to look into other things as well. What are your thoughts about the things he wants this committee to also look at?
My thoughts are that before you get a permit to mine, you need to carry out environmental impact assessment. And you need to provide environmental impact plan. You need to provide a social impact plan. The environmental impact plan will be looking at what the impact will be on the environment as a result of your activities. Now, those plans are presented and debated in town hall style for people to come and make comment to. I remember one of my lecturers, Professor Sabre, wherever you are, good morning, sir. He said that there was a plan that was presented by a company, and they indicated that the water body that passes through a certain community, the acidity of it was such that if you drink it, you are going to die. So somebody challenged the company during the public hearing on the plan that let's go to the stream. And the person took a cup of the water and drank. Said, I want to die. Took another cup. He said, I will even drink a gallon to show that, you see, they were envisaging that their impact on the stream will be such that tomorrow, if they give you that figure, you accept it. So we can have this committee now. There are already regulations in place. Now, the enforcement of those regulations, if the environmental impact plans are presented, do we really take a look at them? Let's look at blasting, for example. It is such that you cannot blast within 500 meters of a residential site or of settlement. Now, do we look at that when they are blasting? Indeed, a lot of companies will not blast such that the impact will be affecting a building which is 500 meters away. Because if you have such a blast, it will affect your own operation. because the walls will collapse. Then we also have situations where there is haulage. If your haulage will pass through communities, you need to construct your own routes. Then we also have situations where there's cyanide. If you are going to use cyanide, you need to restrict it to best international practices. We don't have our own rules. We import those ones. That's why you don't see a lot of cyanide spillage, because they use the ISO standard. Then we also have situations where dust suppression as a result of your mining activities. These are all things you need to present to the minister and the inspectorate division before you are granted license. The catch is that, do we look at the report and question the report? For example, as I said, when the company presented their report and said, this is the acidic value of the water or the basic value of the water, did we say, hold on, let's have an independent report and check those parameters? We don't normally do it.
So for you, enforcement is what is missing?
Very much so. The enforcement is missing. Then the interest of the community members around where the mining take place, that is also one thing that is missing. We used to have advocacy groups for these mining communities, but somewhere along the line they become political or they are seen as radical. And you should actually sometimes attend one of these public hearings about the environmental impact plan or the social impact plan, and you see that people don't appear interested. They are waiting for the fallout from the mining. They are waiting for the goodies that they will get as a result of a mining company operating within their areas. Now, if I come from a community where there's going to be mining tomorrow and I'm a chief, the best I'll do is let us get experts, and they should work for us on our behalf to go through the reports and the plans submitted by the company and give us advice and challenge those findings. If those things are done, some of these audits will not be necessary now, because we have already buffered ourselves towards a potential environmental impact or potential social impact. Those things are not really questioned when they are presented to the public and to the inspector and to the minister. At the end, we just okay, and the mining continues. So when those things happen, and now we find that there are incidents as a result of the mining activities, we don't have anybody to blame, because we didn't take steps when the plans were presented to us.
Okay. Mr. Olasima, should we have an audit? Is this the time? I mean, mining has been going on in Ghana for more than 100 years. But beyond just mining itself, you have quarrying, where there's a lot of explosion to get the stones and all that. Should we have an audit for communities surrounding these kinds of operations?
I think that our regulations are quite adequate. It is not for lack of regulations. But like my brother just said, the people who are supposed to enforce those regulations, that is where we have the deficit.
Why is that a deficit?
Well, one, because the regulator, which is Minerals Commission, I don't think their current strength, they have the capability to sort of be everywhere, you know, anytime they want to. There's lack of resources, and I think if they are empowered and they are given the human resource who have been trained and know what to do, I think that they can live up to the task. Another thing I wanted to add on top of this audit thing is that in serious mining countries, there are regular checks about the quality of air, the quality of water, whether there's dust pollution and all that. Regular. Maybe quarterly, they come and they check. Say what is the quality of the air that the people within the catchment area are breathing? What kind of water are they drinking? What is the level of dust pollution as a result of the mining activity? Those things should be regular. And once they are regular, when things are getting out of hand, you will pick it up immediately and try to, take remedial action. But if you allow it, and it's like laissez-faire, the French will say, and the thing, goes out of hand, then you have a problem. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think that we should cultivate the habit of doing regular checks, monitoring, these activities so that the need for an audit may not come.
Okay, and we're wrapping up now, but Mr. Jimagan, you're also a civil engineer. Should we reconstruct the Apiati township? I think Mr. Wolasime has said that, well, we should do the tests that need to be done, and if that's where people want to go back to living their lives, we should make that happen. What are your thoughts about reconstruction or rehabilitation?
I think we are talking about the manufacturing or the company side of things. We are not looking at the people or the person side of things, the impact. You know, apart from the physical injuries you see, there will be things like trauma, etc. So for us to be thinking about reconstruction, we should be sending in sociologists, psychologists, and counselors to be talking to the people. The question that comes to my mind is that if there was an explosion and I lost 2 children here, and I lost my mother, I lost my father, would I be comfortable to live in the same community? When I come to the roadside, I'm thinking the next vehicle passing by is carrying the explosive and might explode. We should be asking those questions. Then we should be talking to the mining engineers. Are the explosives all burnt out properly, that there will be no further explosion? We should be looking at the water resources engineers. They should be testing the water bodies, etc. to see. So if we are able to talk to all these, or all these people work together and very fast. In fact, let me use this opportunity to commend the minister. The swift action he has taken, etc., is commendable. However, the report should not be a hidden one. Let's share so that we all learn from it, and we make sure that things like this don't happen in future. That aside, Jifa, let me make a quick comment. Every mining company and explosive company must have disaster risk management plan. We should have it. For example, recently there was a situation where we were told that Obuasi was sinking or settling. Now, the whole of Obuasi sort of is lying on top of a mine. Should there be an earthquake or some disaster and there is caving in, what happens? And all these companies should have plans like that and have control measures so that when there's a disaster and they implement them, then they will minimize the impact of the disaster. Or if they foresee a disaster and they implement their control measures, the disasters will not occur. So to me, the reconstruction should be done quickly, but based on the study and the research by the people I've mentioned, in addition to the likes of the geotechnicals that my colleague has mentioned here, to see if there are still cracks in buildings, etc., or the ground is still okay for construction. But top of my head, I would not like to live in that same community
if it had happened to you. Final point from you, Mr. Wolasime.
Well, I think that what he just mentioned, what do you call it, disaster management is part of the regulation. It's part of the regulation. So, you know, it's not for lack of regulation. It is how we approach it. So, you know, going forward, like he said, I think that we should look at, you know, our mining regulations very closely. I will advocate that there should be regular monitoring, you know, quarterly, of our water bodies, of our air quality, and our dust pollution and all that, so that we will, at the end of the day, you know, be doing, you know, justice to the fact that we have a natural resource that we need to develop, but we also are looking at the human side of things.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And that's where we end Key Points for today. It's been a really packed show, but I'm sure you've all enjoyed it since the very beginning. Many thanks to Mr. Theophilus Jimaga, mining engineer and lawyer. Many thanks to Seth Wolasime, mining consultant. I'm Jifa Bampo. Up next, of course, is Warmer Plus. Many thanks to the production team for today. Join us again next week.